Week in Economics on the 16th of December 2017 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network. This is our macroeconomics production. I hope my voice holds up here. A little bit of sinus problems that many across the nation are having. We'll start out with the producer price index, and we'll also look at the tax cuts from a number of perspectives of the Joint Committee on Taxation and various others, what it means, the new indexing scheme that they have out, and where it will affect ordinary people. First, the producer price index. The producer price index for final demand increased at 0.4% in November. Seasonally adjusted, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The final demand price also moved up 0.4 in both October and September. And on an unadjusted basis, the final demand index rose 3.1% for 12 months ending in November. The largest advance since the 3.1 increase for 12 months ending in January of 2012. In November, 3/4 of the rise in the final demand index is attributed to a 1% increase in the price for final demand goods. The index for final demand services climbed 0.2%. The index for final demand less food, energy, and trade services rose 0.4% in November, the largest advance since the increase of 0.6% in April. For 12 months ending in November, the final demand less food, energy, and trade services was up 2.4%. Final demand goods in the index jumped at 1% in November, the largest advance since a 1% increase in January. Over 3/4 of the broad-based November rise can be traced to the price for final demand energy, which climbed 4.6%. The index in final demand for goods less food and energy, and for final demand food, both advanced 0.3%. Producer details: over 2/3 of the November increase in the index for final demand goods is attributed to the price for gasoline, petrol, which jumped 15.8%. The index for light motor trucks, pharmaceuticals, preparations, beef, veal, residential, electric power, and jet fuel also moved higher. In contrast, the price for processing young chickens fell, and the index for ethanol and commercial electric power also declined. The final demand services, prices for final demand services advanced to 0.2 in November, the third consecutive rise. Leading of the November increase, the index for final demand services, less trade, transportation, and warehouse moved up 0.4%. Prices for final demand transportation and warehousing services climbed 0.6%. Conversely, margins for final demand trade services decreased 0.3%. Product detailed: about half of the November rise in the index for final demand services can be traced to the price for loan services, partially, which increased at 3.1. The index for travel, accommodation services, health, beauty and optical goods, retailing, food and alcohol retailing, chemicals, allied products, wholesaling, apparel, footwear, accessories, retailing also moved higher. In contrast, margins for machinery, equipment, wholesaling declined 1.9%. The index for fuels and lubrications, retailing for bundled wire telecommunication access also fell. And there's a list of these in November. I think we got them all there in terms of where they stood. Within the intermediate demand in November, prices for processed goods advanced 0.5%. The index for unprocessed goods rose 3.2, and prices for services moved up 0.7. Processed goods for intermediate demand, the index for processed goods for intermediate demand increased 0.5% in November, the fourth straight advance. Over half of the rise in November can be traced to prices for processed energy goods, which moved up 1.7%. The index for processed materials, less food, energy, and for processed foods and feeds both increased to 0.3% for 12 months ending in November. Prices for processed goods for intermediate demand jumped 5.3%, of the largest advance since the 5.4 rise in April. Product demand, a major factor in November's increase in prices for processed goods for intermediate demand, was indexed for diesel fuel and rose 1.8%. Prices for gasoline, primarily based organic chemicals, plastics, construction products, plastic resins and material, beef and veal also moved higher. Concurrently, the index for commercial electric power fell 2.5%. Prices for ethanol and processing of young chickens also declined. They don't have turkeys here, but turkey prices did in fact decline also. On processed goods for intermediate demand, the index for intermediate demand jumped 3.2% in November, the largest rise since climbing 3.8% in January. Nearly 60% of the November's increase in the price for unprocessed goods for intermediate demand can be attributed to the index for unprocessed energy materials, which advanced 5.5%. Prices for unprocessed foodstuffs and feedstuffs moved up to 0.7%. The index for unprocessed non-food materials, less energy, rose 0.8%. For 12 months ending in November, prices for unprocessed goods for intermediate demand climbed 10.6%, the largest 12-month increase since the 12.8% jump in April. Price details. In November, over half of the rise in price for unprocessed goods for intermediate demand can be traced to crude petroleum, which increased 11%. Prices for slaughter hogs, steers, heifers, natural gas, waste paper, non-ferrable scrap also advanced. In contrast, the index for slaughtered chickens fell 5.7%. Prices for carbon steel, scrap, and for for coal moved lower. So much for the coal industry there. Services for intermediate demand. The index for services for intermediate demand climbed 0.7 in November, the largest increase since a 1.3% advanced in January of 2016. Nearly two-thirds of the broad-based rise in November can be traced to prices for services, less trade, transportation, warehousing, which moved up 6.10%. The index for trade services for intermediate demand and for transportation, warehousing services for intermediate demand climbed 1% and 5% respectively for 12 months ending in November. Prices for services for intermediate demand increased 3.2%, the largest rise since the 3.2% advance in November of 2012. A major factor in November's increase in the index for services It was security brokerage, dealing investments, advanced and related services, which moved up 1.5%. The index for loan services, partially and business wired telecommunications, machinery, equipment parts, supply wholesalers, portfolio management, and legal services all moved higher. Conversely, prices for bundle wire telecommunications services fell 3.3%. The index for deposit services, partially and for fuel and lubrication, retailing also declined. So it was basically sort of a mixed bag. Stage 4, the intermediate demand. The index for Stage 4 intermediate demand moved up 0.6 in November, the largest rise since a 0.6% advance in January. In November, prices for total service input to Stage 4 increased in the index for machinery and equipment, parts, supply, wholesaling, gas, loans, sales, partially portfolio management, securities, brokerages, and legal services outweighed decrease in building for the 12 months ending in November. Prices for Stage 4 intermediate demand climbed 3.7%. Stage 3 intermediate demand jumped 1.4%. In November, the index for goods input to Stage 3 increased in the index for gasoline, slaughtered hogs, etc. Chickens, asphalt, bundle wire communications. The 12 months ending in November, prices for Stage 3 intermediate demand rose to 5.4%, the largest in 12 months since the 5.4% jump in December of 2011. Stage 2, I won't go this, we'll append this in for each year with the release of the Producer Price Index for January, seasonally adjusted factors, etc. Here, there's just some exclamations here. Final demand by individual commodities, etc. The Producer Price Index weight is to be updated in February of 2018. The release of the January Producer's Price Index data of the Bureau of Labor Statistics will update the value weight to more accurately reflect recent production and value weights from the census of manufacturers, the census of mining, the census of services of agriculture, etc. Producer Price Index will be affected by this weight update, including all. Here we go. I see it. I'll get my pointer here. Anyway, the final bill is completed. Here's what it is. This is heavy belonging in the Washington Post. The appeal to lockdown votes need to pass the measure. They had to deal with input from Marco Rubio. He's from Florida, and Coca. It's officially known as the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Represents the largest one-time reduction in corporate tax in U.S. history, from 35%. It finally went down to 21%. The bill also lowers taxes for a vast majority of Americans as well as small business owners, at least until the cuts expire after 8 years. Last-minute changes, provisions that were remain in the bill: the student loan interest deduction and the deduction for excess medical expenses and tax breaks for graduate students. A change made Friday to win over Senator Rubio will expand the benefit for child care to more working class families. Here's a rundown on the changes. A new tax cut for the rich. The plan lowers the top rate on the current law at 39.6 for married couples making over $470,000 a year. The bill would drop to 37% and raise the threshold at which the top bracket kicks in for $500,000 for individuals and $600,000 for couples. This amounts to a significant tax break for the very wealthy, departure from repeated claims by the Trump administration top officials that the tax bill would not cut taxes on the rich. It does indeed. The new tax breaks for millionaires go beyond what was originally the House and Senate bills, which Republicans seek to ensure wealthy taxpayers in New York, Connecticut, and California don't end up paying substantially higher tax bills. A massive tax cut for corporations starting in January of 2008. Big business rates will fall from 35 to 21%. It's still roughly $1 trillion tax cut for business over 10 years and next decade. You can deduct just $10,000 in state and local property tax, one of the more controversial provisions. Under current law, the state and local deduction known as SALT is unlimited. So in other words, you went from unlimited to $10,000. Not a very good deal. Now it's $10,000. You can deduct up to $10,000. Marriage couples are limited. People can deduct up to that. Marriage couples are limited to just $10,000. The House bill restricted the $10,000 deduction to property tax. The final bill allows state and local taxes to be deducted. Also, that's a move for states such as New York, Connecticut, and California. It'll cause property values to fall in high tax cities, leaving less money for public education and repairs. Most Americans will pay less taxes until 2026. A typical family will save $2,000, but the reality is the amount will vary greatly depending on the size, location, and circumstances of each family. The tax bill will increase the number of Americans who owe nothing in taxes from currently 44% today to 47%, 47.5% after the tax plan takes effect in January of 2018. But all individual tax cuts are scheduled to go away in 2025. And the Republicans just say that future Congress will extend the tax cuts. Remember the Bush tax cuts. Nonetheless, to the child credit, this is by Rubio and Lee of Utah. They would be more generous for low-income families and the working class. The current tax credit is $1,000 per child. The Senate bill expands the tax credit, with the Senate going up to a maximum of $2,000 per child. The bill keeps the $2,000 per child credit. Families making up to $400,000 to get it. It also makes more tax credit refundable, meaning families that work but don't earn enough to owe federal income tax will get a larger check back from the government. Sort of like the earned income, a little bit different. Benefits for families who initially are limited to $1,100, but through the changes there, they will go up to $1,400. So they'll get an extra $300 there. Individual health insurance mandates go away in 2019, not next year. The bill does not start to repeal until 2019. And the projection, by the federal, by the budget office, the Congressional Budget Office, 13 million fewer Americans will have insurance in 10 years. Also cut government spending by $300 billion. You can pass on to your heirs now. This is for the rich, $22 million tax-free. Under current law, up to $5.5 million tax-free. That is the threshold is $11 million for married couples. The House wanted to do away with the estate tax entirely, but the estate tax stays there. The death tax, now the first $11 million that people pass on to their heirs, and property, stock, and other assets won't be taxed. Yes, that means $22 million for married couples. The pass-through, it's been around for a long time. Companies get a 20% reduction. Most American business are organized as pass-throughs. Companies in which income from business is passed through to the business owner's individual tax return. S-corps, LLCs, partnerships, and sole proprietorships are all examples of pass-through businesses. In the final GOP bill, the majority of these companies get to deduct 20% of their income tax-free. A large reduction that mirrors what the Senate bill. The change, however, expires in 2025. The National Federation of Independent Businesses opposed it. Now they've endorsed it. Now this covers such things as law firms, doctors' offices, investment offices can take only 20% deduction if and up to $315,000 for married couples. No corporate attorney minimum tax. The final bill gets rid of the corporate minimum tax, a big relief for the business community. Senate included the corporate AMT in their version. House did not. The corporate AMT makes it difficult for businesses to reduce their tax bill, much less than 21%. CEOs complained about it. Fewer families will have to pay the individual attorney minimum, or AMT. That was initiated in 1969. For so many credits, and that was under the Tricky Dick Richard Nixon, and loopholes to lower their tax bill to almost nothing. But what starts out as a way to prevent wealthy families from dodging started to hit more and more families over time. The alternative minimum kicks in now for individuals earning over $120,000 a year, married couples $160,900, and under the final bill, the threshold is lifted to $500,000 for individuals, $1 million for families, married couples. Excuse me. The mortgage deduction is still around. On the current law, taxpayers can deduct interest payments up to $1 million worth of mortgage. The House set the cap at $500,000 for new loans. Existing mortgages are unaffected, but the final version, the Republicans lifted the cap to $750,000. The final bill is at $1.46 trillion. That's just an estimation. The Republicans decided they would be all right to go into debt up to $5.1 trillion, and already 20 on the card already. The student loan deduction and medical expense deduction, graduates tuition waiver. Some of us take advantage of that. Got rid of these popular ones. Now they are back, dropping the threshold deduction for expenses over 10% of income to expenses over 7.5% of income for 2017, 18, 19. The medical deduction reverts to 10% at the end. The Republicans decided to allow middle-class families to continue using the breaks if they qualify. Retirement, 401ks, that's been around a long time also. No change. Mosques, churches, synagogues, and other nonprofits. This is the Johnson Amendment by Lyndon Johnson. Stays in place. Trump and the conservatives wanted to totally destroy the word, the Johnson Amendment, which was passed, incidentally, at the time by Senator Johnson of Texas in 1954. Prevents religious institutions and nonprofits from getting involved in election via fundraising or endorsement. The House wanted to repeal the Johnson Amendment. It didn't work out for them. That is the jobs and, what was it called? The Jobs Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018. On we go here. Yeah, let's see, said the blind man. We already covered this. This is from the Washington Post. Basically, what's going on, making the math work, etc., the corporate tax. We won't go over this again. But there is an interesting tweets here, thanks to primary estimates from nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation that was released alongside the final bill on Friday. We know individual taxpayers who ultimately bear the costs of the bill. It's explained in Batchelor's tweet. That is Lily Batchelor. Anyway, some have asked how the tax plan can permanently cut taxes on corporations on net if the Senate rules require no increase in the deficit for 10 years. It It does so through two permanent stealth tax increases on individuals, slower inflation indexing, which will hurt pensioners, and repealing individual mandates. The bill starts out by repealing something that was unpopular from the start, the requirement under the Affordable Care Act that people buy insurance. The estimate of the provision increased federal revenue by $53.3 billion. Will increase it by in 2027. It's easy math for the Republicans. Wipe out the unpopular rule off the books and get a chunk of change toward the corporate tax cuts. The next move is fuzzy but also far-reaching. The bill would change the way tax brackets are indexed to inflation. The bill adopts the inflation measures that economists regard as more accurate. Some do, some don't. It's one that doesn't increase as quickly. Effectively, this means people with higher brackets, higher brackets faster. Consider hypothetical if a bracket for married couples had topped off at 45,000 in 2000, it would be at 64,300 under the current system, but only at 61,350 under the new inflation measure. That means any family earning between 61,000 and 64,400 would find themselves in a higher tax bracket, even if their income has grown at the same rate. This effect wave that hits lower and middle class harder. The wealthier don't jump in the brackets. Changing inflation measurement gets the Republicans another $25.6 billion. Both hit the budget. Jujitsu are built to last. They aren't benefits that are sunsetting like the temporary individual tax cuts. Bachelor writes, the joint only scored the bill for the coming decade, but the structure above inflation measures also guaranteed would be lower. Two significant caveats. First, a number of analysts argue that it's wrong to consider the loss of insurance related to the end of the Obamacare tax mandates because it reflects individual choice, not insurance. Secondly, most Republicans say that the expected congressional extension to the individual cuts when they expire is in 2025. Indeed, in the short term, the vast majority of Americans want to see a tax hike. That is from the nonpartisan tax policy people. They were evaluating the Senate bill on the 4th of December. Only 7% of filers will see an increase in 2019, and in 2020 that will rise to 45.7 if Congress doesn't intervene. Meanwhile, businesses are getting $49.4 billion cut this year. The tax bill, according to this is the Joint Committee on Taxation, is to raise taxes on individuals by a cumulative $83 billion in 2027. So this is some of the things out there. We did this in Greg Ipe of the Wall Street Journal. We did this in a prior broadcast talking about the technical tweak to the inflation measurement and how it will affect people, particularly when they start measuring other types of benefits, etc. But many middle-class households will start out as the plan's beneficiaries, but that will quickly change. And we were looking at Ms. Bachelor, wait a minute, Miss Lily Becheder. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Batchelder. Anyway, we have her on our Numbers Man Twitter feed. Explains how the tax plan, the long-range tax corporate cuts are paid for by individuals. analysis here. This is from the Washington Post. We already talked about this one, the trade-offs there. The child care tax ends up with 10 million kids getting $75 less. This is the final changes. Don't alter tax bills. Basically, 10 million working families. That's the child tax credit. It's out here. I don't know. I will see this come up here. This is from our friends at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. This is by Chi Chung. The final change doesn't alter tax bill. Basically, 10 million working families get a little or nothing. Last minute changes. This is a child tax credit that Republicans. This will increase from a $1,000 per child to $2,000 per child, starting for starters, 10 million children under 17 in the lower income working families who receive a partial no credit will either receive no improvement in credit or token increase of $1 to $75. Despite the last minute changes, these families would receive nothing more than they have received under the Senate passed bill. Another 14 million low income, moderate income families would get a tax credit increase more than $75, but less than the $1,000 per child increase that families of higher incomes get. Under the law, the child's tax credit provides a maximum tax rate of $1,000 per child under 18. The credit is partially refundable, meaning that it partially but not entirely available to families with incomes below certain levels. The refundable portion is limited to 15% of the family's earnings over $3,000. The Senate would bill would increase from $1,000 to $2,000, making the credit, the new credit available to 17-year-olds, but only slightly increase the refundability of existing credit, which limits to 15% over $2,500 as opposed to $3,000 under current law. In fashioning the bill, Republican leaders made a last-minute change. This was to satisfy Lee and Rubio. Last-minute change that Republican leaders made were modest and did mostly nothing to change the fundamental nature of the bill. The final bill does nothing compared to the Senate bill to improve the child credit for 10 million children in low-income working families, meaning that those kids get a token of about $75 per family, no increase at all. Many working families with children under 17 years will get a partial credit, noting that the refundable amount is limited on the current law to 15% of their earnings over $3,000. The Senate would lower the threshold to $2,500 towards that, translating to an increase of just $75 for those families. The final bill increases the child credit for moderate incomes, but 14 million children wouldn't get the full $1,000 increase that higher income families get. So in other words, this is something slanted towards higher income families, and basically the chart is laid down here. Single mothers with 2 children earning $14,000, full-time minimum would get $75. Married couples with 2 children earning $30,000 would get $800. Married couples with 2 children earning $100,000, they'd get the big one, the $2,000. Married couples with 2 children making $400,000 would get $4,000. Very good chart here, and that is the end of that one. I'll append this one also, and this is the tax policy. Major tax provisions in the Senate bill cuts Tax Cut and Jobs Act is passed by the Senate. Tax units with tax increase or tax cuts explained there. So, in other words, passed by the Senate expands the cash income levels in 19, excluding reductions to the ACA, individual shared responsibility payments, modification and limits of excess employee remuneration. You just make sure we get all this in here. Repeal of reduction for moving expense. Here we go. Due to data limitations, also excluding the following provisions: repeal of exclusion for employer-provided qualified moving expense reimbursements, repeal of deductions for moving expense for other than members of the armed forces, simplified accounting for small businesses, limitations on deduction by employers of expenses on qualified transportation, modification and limitations on excess employee remuneration, 20% excise tax on excess tax exempt organizations, executive compensation, tax gains on a sale of a partnership interests on look-through basis, repeal of advance refund bonds. They're mostly treatment of S corps conversion into C corps. Anyway, this is some of it here, and it goes on and on and on. Expanded cash incomes, of course, the levels and all that sort of stuff. We'll put that on. We'll have a lot of add-ons for this production, I suppose. Anyway, now let's go to the BBC. We hope. And we'll do the markets here. Nonetheless, the BBC Global, this is on Friday unless otherwise noted, 108.68, that's where it stood. The FTSE all shares at 20.38. In Frankfurt, the DAC was at 35.48 on Friday. In Paris, they were in the negative at, in the negative at 7.84. In Brussels, 7.05. In Madrid, a negative 26.10. In Zurich, on Friday, 11.69. In Moscow on Friday, negative 8.24. The Johannesburg all share on Friday, negative 294.82. In Bombay, 216.27. And in Karachi, 422.30. In Lahore, they were in the negative 45.11. In Colombo, negative 4.94. In Tehran on Wednesday, 654.80. And in Sydney, negative 9.30. The Nikkei was down negative 41.23. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng, negative 318.27. All of the so-called Asian Pacific markets were down. In Shanghai, negative 26.30. In New York, at 143.08, they were in the positive, and the Nasdaq was at 80.006. The Merc, that's the commodities market out in the Midwest city of Chicago, at 23.80. On Monday in San Pablo, 1,046.17 in the negative, and in Mexico on Friday, 648.42 in the negative. They were down 1.39%, if you want to go in that direction. And on to the commodities. Brent crude was down 8 cents at $63.23. You can see why gasoline prices have increased to the amount they are today. And on Wednesday, the spot was up 87 cents at $58.59. West Texas Intermediate was up 29 cents at $57.33. T-Boone Pickers jumping for joy. He remembers $15 a barrel oil. The Forex gold index up $1.65 at $1,257.25. Dubai gold futures were down 10 cents at $1,257.80. Silver was down 3 cents at $15.98. Euronext Live futures, we always do those for some reason. Cocoa was up 164. And who else there? Well, Robusta coffee futures is up 142. $9 there anyway. And white sugar futures were up $23. All the commodities were up. The Bloomberg Commodity Index, which came out on Friday, at 85.59. So the commodities were up. People in the speculation business were speculating. And somewhere here we have the latest on the digital currency known as Bitcoin. Healthcare, this is from Reuters, incidentally. Draws election year worries, but 2016 repeat is not seen. Another year looming. Investors in healthcare are wary of the coming months that could reopen wounds suffered in 2016. Healthcare becoming a hot issue in a 2018 election. A big risk stems from voters giving majorities to the Democrats. Investors worry that the shift would pressure the industry, including through a greater focus on prescription drugs, and similarly scrutiny that plagued the healthcare sector, particularly pharmaceuticals and biotech shares in 2016. If we wake up tomorrow and it was a given fact that the Democrats were going to take over the House and the Senate, healthcare would be one of the worst performing sectors of the market. That is from Walter Todd, Chief Investment Officer at Greenwood Capital Associates in Greenwood, South Carolina. Momentum behind such shifts appears to be building after Democrat Doug Jones, cut the Republican edge to 51 to 49 seats for the Democrats. And so it's closer and closer to. Healthcare shares will likely stand up better to election risks in 2018 than they did the scrutiny of 2016. Now we're talking about big pharma there, which we need to be looked at. We simply just literally cannot afford big pharma. For one sector is cheap, the sector is cheap relative to broad market, following the 2016 struggles. And investors also say it could benefit from a potential boost in merger activities if drug makers and other multinational companies bring back cash from overseas. We'll see. And what else do we have here from old Reuters? Healthcare underperformed, was the worst since, that was in 2016, since 1999, and the worst in an election year since 1992. That was the year that Bill Clinton ran. According to Thomson Reuters data back to 1990, the sector's annual performance on average topped the broad S&P 500 by 2.7%, but the 7-year midterm years over time it outperformed by 6.2%. To be certain healthcare issues, including the cost of medicine, have drawn broad attention as populist issues, including from some in the Trump camp. Democrats as a whole see it as more likely to push for changes, and healthcare stocks rebounded at 21.5% so far in 2017, but were nearly matched by a 19.3% rise in the S&P. The sector is 16 times forward earning estimate, trading roughly at 10% discount to 18.2 price to earnings ratio, there, according to Thomson Reuters. It's still reasonably cheap. That's from Thomas with Manual Life Assets in Boston. Healthcare becoming a campaign issue is definitely a risk. Anyway, Bitcoin hits new highs as warnings grow louder there. It's at 18,000 on the Bitstamp exchange on Friday, up 9% on the day as warnings grow. The risk of investing in high volatility speculative instruments. There have always been people that I saw something that was kind of a strange thing about investing $200 and taking a gamble. Well, sort of like fool's gold. Bitcoin has climbed almost 80% so far in December alone, putting it on track for the best month in percentage terms since December of 2013. It reached a high of 17,900 on the Luxembourg-based is Bitstamp exchange. Bitcoin has added another fifth to its valuation since Monday, trading slightly higher, calmer than the wild pricing swings the market has seen in recent weeks. The volatility lowered since the launch of Bitcoin futures on Cboe Global on Sunday. Market watchers say Bitcoin prices are being lifted by the launch of a rival CME group, Bitcoin futures. You're going to see more of this. The hope is that the futures is signaling unlocking of institutional money into the digital era. There's a rapid demand and the ramifications of the technology and its principle. That is from Charles Hayton, the founder of we use Crypto Compare, a bunch of that around. But outside the crypto market, words continue to grow about the amount of money piling into the space. A study by, Angela Ruffin, University, the Trinity College, is in Dublin, Ireland. Release said Bitcoin could pose a threat to financial stability of traditional currency markets. Now, this is kind of interesting here because Dr. Yellen talked about that and she did not see it. But again, the evidence finds that the price of Bitcoin has been artificially inflated by a speculative investor, no doubt about that, putting it in a bubble. That is from Lorser Ranover. One of the reports offers a lecture at Angela Ruskin University. Though Bitcoin is not regulated by government, it could still have a kick-off effect on traditional markets due to the interconnectivityness of cryptocurrency markets with other financial assets. No doubt. And moreover, Bitcoin's total market size is now at $300 billion, meaning the impact on any future price collapse would not be large enough. No, it would not. That is not very large. The BBC reported on Thursday that the head of the British Financial Conduct Authority, Mr. Bailey, has warned Bitcoin buyers should be prepared for the possibility that they could lose all of their money. No doubt that could actually happen. Hard to say on that. We'll take a look at that study for later reference. Anyway, nonetheless, this will do it for us. Happy Bitcomming to the Bitcommers. Incidentally, MedLife, before we forget about them, is going to have to dip into their reserves. They have about 600,000 people who received benefits from the company via a retirement. Their business who have affected the average beneficiary about $150. Now, this is failure to pay a pension to potentially tens of thousands of people will have a significant thing on MetLife. MetLife did not say how many years of missing income was owed. However, the increase to reserves that could be material to MetLife's financial results. People who missed out on payments have changed jobs, relocated. Oh, I see what's going on here. And otherwise unreachable on currently available information, the company says. And that normally happens. People will have these little pension accounts, $100 or something like that, but they qualified when they had defined pensions. And for whatever reason, they died, they moved, and they have not collected. So there's a lot of money there to be collected, no doubt about that. So it's one of those kinds of situations out there, and we'll see where it goes. And I was just looking at the Trinity College here. This is the Cambridge Network. Trinity College is Dublin and Dublin City University. And we'll get to the open access Angela Ruckin University. Anyway, we'll get to it, and if we can, we'll append it to the description of this broadcast. This will do it for us, for businesses. Keep your eyes. Let me start this over again. For businesses, make it a productive week. For the consumer, your eyes on the prize as we move through in the U.S. and other places. The holiday shopping season, hadn't heard much about it lately. It pretty much, a lot of it has petered out with Cyber Monday, Turkey Day sales, etc. Don't hear very much about before seiner sales, and it'll be interesting to see how the day after the Santa pops down the chimney, supposedly what the tale was, and how that fares for retail merchants. Nonetheless, have a good week. Talk to you next week. Good day.